Good morning. It's Friday. It's Memorial Day weekend Friday. This is the Friday Grief Chat. I'm Jill.
Deb, and this is Oscar underneath here. He's a great cat. He is. He's protective. He doesn't bark, but he's protective. So I just love him.
And he is so soothing when you just do the whole pet,
I know.
right?
Yes, yes. Very few people can touch his bottom like I am, and I'm one
Mm-hmm.
of when he was in the vet several years ago. And, when Daryl and I would show up, he would be as great as could be. And the staff there was totally jealous. They go, take him home. He growls at us. He does all these things. You show up, he's like a kid in daycare,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, yeah. So anyway, he's my blue-eyed baby.
I'm so glad you've got him.
I am. I
Yeah.
am. And think about how soothing pets are, because actually when you pet them, you your hormones, your dopamine, your serotonin, oxy oxytocin, I think, goes up too. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how that is, but anyway, all your feel good hormones. So Jill
Right.
has a dog that, if anybody wants, she'll tell you. Rescued him from a shelter, and
She was on
he's
the streets and she's just a sweetheart. And we prevented her from going to the shelter and she now needs a home, but we'll keep her till we find the right family for her. She unfortunately was not chipped.
how old
So
is he, do you think?
between 2 and 3, maybe. She's a youngster,
Young, young.
really young. So we've got the long Memorial Day weekend to kind of get to know her and work with her and see what we can do with her and take some cute pictures and entice one of you to take her home.
I
Because
know. And I'm
baby
in
dogs and
Illinois.
blind dogs don't mix well.
No, 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 no.
Mm-mm. No.
So there's a couple things we want to talk about today. The first one is Memorial Day is coming up. Memorial Day is different than what most people think. They think it's anyone who died in the service, or anyone that was in service and died. And it's the opposite. It is for people who died while
While
serving their
serving.
country.
Yeah.
Right. Not like my dad died after he was in the military. He would be celebrated on Veterans Day.
Right.
My husband's uncle, he died on a ship during World War II, not on the ship, but the ship got bombed. And so
That's Memorial.
that's Memorial Day. So when you're having your barbecue and you're feeling free to eat outside, your houses aren't getting bombed like in Ukraine, when you're when you're able to sing, when you're able to go to church or any religion of your
Pass the
choice.
ballot.
Think about the people who died
In service
during
to their
serve the
country.
country that made this possible,
Mm.
because we're still a relatively new country
Yep.
compared to others, but we still have certain freedoms that other countries do not.
And we've had a lot of people who've served our country over the centuries and who have been willing to put their lives on the line. And so many of them did.
Mm-hmm.
We just, in fact, this year just lost the last Pearl Harbor survivor.
Mm-hmm.
So his memory will be celebrated this year, especially on Memorial Day. But we have lots of people who have served our country and not survived, and his shipmates were amongst those who should be celebrated. And we want to remember them and honor them. Every national cemetery is putting out flags tomorrow morning early. So
Mm-hmm.
if you are awake early tomorrow morning and you have a national cemetery near you, You have the opportunity to go out and put the flags out. Traditionally, it's been scouts, but now it's everybody. So show up and they'll hand you a bunch of flags to put on all of the graves.
The Daryl every Memorial Day puts flowers out for all his relatives, and one of which was a nurse in World War II, and she is a veteran. She is would not be technically celebrated on Memorial Day. When I went to Washington, D.C., and saw a nurse's memorial, that was incredible. And if you have a chance to go to the Vietnam Memorial or visit a memorial in your town, there's many young men that died in Iraq, like we have, and I'm going to say his name, Corey Hubble Way is a street that was named, it's not a street, it's a country road that was named for Corey Hubble, who lived down the way. And he was a soldier in Iraq. And just, and there's Afghanistan, there's all these wars where people had signed up to do what they said was their duty.
Mm-hmm.
And some in the 60s did not sign up. They were drafted. And they went and just say thank you in your heart over the weekend.
Absolutely. On
Yeah.
Memorial Day too, I remember those who didn't die while they were serving, but died as a result of their serving.
That's absolutely.
Because there are so many that we have lost because of damage from chemicals, damage from experiences, damage from lack of support when they returned home.
That's right.
And in one way or shape or another, having served their country cost them their life.
Absolutely. I have a friend who was in Vietnam, and the chemicals from Agent Orange affected him. I have other family that may have died from suicide
Mm-hmm.
or cancer because of certain chemicals. So, and thank you. And Steve is another one. And
His husband died as a result of exposure to Agent Orange.
yes.
And that
Yeah.
caused ALS. It causes ALS, and it also causes brain tumors, which is how we lost a member of our church who served during that era.
It also contributes to prostate cancer and others. So
it does indeed. And I have a therapist friend who, because of his dad's service and Agent Orange, ended up with spina bifida. And so he served a lifetime because of his dad's service. So there's so many places and so many people to remember it. And there's so many multiple layers of different kinds of grief.
There is.
But we can celebrate those memories and celebrate the people who have survived with those and are continuing to survive.
Right.
And we can put our flags out if that is something you choose to do. And you can go put the flags out at the cemetery if that's something you choose to do, or buy the flowers and rest them on the graves.
We have different size flags in our garage. And so I'll probably put them between the hostas and then I'll take them down at the end of the weekend and put them up again July 4th. So that's what we do around here.
We're going to get ours out of the garage this weekend because normally we fly peace, love, and rainbows, but we will be flying our American flag for this weekend.
Oh, good. I also wanted to talk about, Jill, you wrote me about the movie If, and that's a new one out with Ryan Reynolds. And And thank you, Steve, for what I'm just going to read what Steve wrote, even though it's the last part of our conversation. So many veterans and their families have suffered through the neglected VA and society, and it's our duty to remember them on this
Yes.
special occasion. Absolutely, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I'm going out to Denver to be with my family while they go through XYZ. And my cousin there works for the VA to get people services. And he was in Iraq. I think he was in Iraq or Iran. I'm sorry, I don't remember which, but he was there. Anyway, back to what we were saying about
The movie If, which I confess I have not seen.
I have not seen it either, but I started to read some reviews,
Uh-huh.
and the parents are crying more so than the kids. And you were saying some of the reviews were like, why are we exposing our kids to this grief?
And
Right?
they're also saying it doesn't handle grief well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because I haven't seen it, I don't know what they mean by handling grief well. However, I do you remember the first movie you saw that had grief in it, whether it was talked about or not? Do you remember the first movie?
The red fern.
That's right.
I
You're
know I know
what
where the red fern grows. I something about where the red fern grows.
Okay. So what was that movie about? What was the grief scene?
I honestly can't remember the particular scene, but it involved a death and remembering it and coping with the tragedy. And I remember it felt overwhelming and there was not a lot of hopefulness to it.
Hmm. Do I confess, and my age, and that's interesting. And you didn't have anybody to discuss it with, did you? Did you go with a parent, or were you watching it by yourself?
Watched it in school.
In school, did they talk about grief afterwards?
Oh, are you kidding me?
Oh, well, I just thought I'd ask. The first, I can't remember which came first. So, um, when I looked up grief movies, they talked about Bambi 2. I saw the first
I
Bambi,
did too. Yeah.
and that might have been, I might have seen it in the theaters back in the 50s. And I don't remember when it came out, but there was also, so in that one, spoiler alert, dad dies, he gets hunted. Bang, he's dead, right? In Bambi 2, apparently mom dies and they talk about it. Uh, Old Yeller.
Yeah, I
Their
can't watch
dog.
that one. I'm with
Yeah.
Phoebe on if you've ever seen the scene from Friends and
Yeah.
Phoebe's like, "What?"
The
Yeah,
dog dies.
the
No,
dog dies. Yeah, that's no.
nobody.
Mm-mm.
Yes, that's right. People do not want to. And there was a legitimate reason, because Old Yeller had been bitten
And had rabies.
and had rabies. So, it
It was just particularly gruesome.
and people talk about, uh, you know,
The Lion King starts with a
the
death.
Lion King.
That's
Oh
how
my,
the opening is dead.
yeah. How about Big Hero? I look at, I went down the rabbit hole, and Rabbit Hole is a movie for kids that
Mhm.
talks about grief, but Coco,
Mm.
Rabbit
Coco was a
Hole,
favorite of mine.
Big Hero 6. it's been a while since I've watched that, but that has a grief and death thing. You know what else does? And I haven't seen this. It's a long movie. It's Bicentennial Man. And I think that it has Robin Williams and someone else. And he is a robot that changes over, he never dies until he actually develops more human skills as his robot develops. And yeah, see, rabbit hole, Steve mentioned that. And at the end, he gets to die, right? It's not just animals that die. How about Finding Nemo,
Mm-hmm.
right? His mom isn't there anymore. Um, Bridge to Terabithia. And, you know, think about that one. My girl, I think she has an illness of some sort. I don't know what Fly Away Home is, but these are just, I don't, when they say they didn't handle it well, and I'm hoping to see it this weekend or
Mm-hmm.
very, very soon. What does it mean not handled well? And if you don't think it's handled well,
How should we handle it? And what should we give kids as message about grief?
yeah, and what age? And we have plenty of information out there. I remember I said this is one of the most interesting kid conversations that I was privy to. I was driving home from my grandkids, Claire and Austin. Their great grandmother had died. And it was explained to them that she died because she had something in her brain that uh, shut off, or however the mom said it. Well, I'm listening on the way home and driving, and these kids are arguing how she died, not about the funeral. Like, no, she died because this happened in her brain. No, she died because that happened in her brain. I didn't say anything because, you know, let them figure it out. And it was just really interesting to have young children talk about how someone died.
Mm-hmm.
And I complimented the parent
Mm-hmm.
on good job. These are the conversations
We need to
that
have.
that's right.
Mhm.
What was
I was present when my grandmother died when I was 13. She was dying, and we saw her daily. But they
Mhm,
called us in the evening, and we rolled out to the room and the board and care where she was living, because she was very end stage Alzheimer's.
mhm.
And we sat with her while she took her last breaths, and then helped dress her and get her ready for the mortuary. And then we were part of picking out the flowers and the casket. And that was our role as the grandchildren. We were the only grandkids, because
Wow.
death is part of life, and that's how it worked.
That that's amazing. And that's how you approach
Hmm.
with your gifts of sensitivity to grief and death, and that's who you are.
It
Um,
certainly shapes who you are if you are able to allow kids to grieve and talk about loss and be present for it and not make it scary, to make it normal, which it is. Then it becomes part of who they are, and they do better with subsequent losses.
you know, I want to ask you, I know, here I am interviewing Jill. Um, um, what do you remember as your first loss of, these are two different things, if you had a pet, and so pet and people? what were the first losses? So there are two different questions. First loss of a person, first loss of a pet.
First loss of a person would have been my great grandmother when
And how old were you? Yeah.
I was probably 7, and I knew her. I didn't know her well, but I knew her. I had spent time with her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there were tears in the house, and I didn't attend the funeral because she was in Iowa, but my mom went. And my dad sat with us and talked to us about being supportive of mommy and also allowing us to cry if we needed to, and talking about, what role she had played. Um, and then we had a family meal when mom and my grandmother returned from the funeral so
Wow.
that we could talk about her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because that was the Swedish, well, one of two Swedish grandmas, great grandmas. And then loss of pet. We had a lot of small animals. In addition to, I had a cat from the time I was 3. He died when I was 18.
Mm.
Um, but we had guinea pigs and rabbits. Um, and when those losses happened, there was a shoebox that came out and a little bit of satin that went in the box, that was left over from making baby clothes generations before.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone got their own box, and the hole got dug, and there was a funeral in the backyard.
Wow.
Actually, a picture of me conducting a funeral wearing a choir robe when I was about 7, with all the neighbor kids circled around.
That is great. Great.
So it's for our family, this was part of life. But my dad was at least 10, 12 years older than every other parent in my classes. So I had and my parents were 10 years apart. So I had and then my grandparents as well, and one set of great grandparents were 24 years apart. So I had lots of seriously older relatives. So losing people was a natural part. We got those phone calls probably once a month, and that was just part of life, and that was how it was explained. They were both farm kids, and this is just what happens.
Interesting.
How
Very
about
interesting.
you?
This will explain why I'm sensitive and good at my job,
Yes.
because I had the exact opposite.
Yes, you did.
And you know, I I was always close. My first pet was a rabbit, and I never knew what happened to the rabbit. He was just gone. No one if they talked about it, I don't remember that. Um, if another animal died, he went away. And that's all that was talked about. My first experience with people were my grandparents. Now, I can't imagine you and I were much different, but I always talked a lot and had a lot of questions.
That
Is that pretty?
sounds really standard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Us.
And so when I was 7 or 6, it was the weirdest thing. My parents had gone away, and I didn't know where they went. And our neighbor, Mrs. Loam, she came over and she said, I want to tell you that your grandmother died and you can feel sad. Well, because things just went away, I I had seen Bambi by that time. I had seen Old Yeller by that time. And I was sort of stunned. I'm like, what does that mean? You can be sad if you want. And then they sent me to somebody's house to sleep for 3 days. I wasn't allowed at a funeral. And
Wow.
same thing with, because most
Right.
likely they were afraid I was going to ask too many questions. I was going to be too talkative. Therefore, I was going to be inappropriate, right? According to my parents' standards.
Right.
Now, the other part was the next year, my grandfather died. And the same thing happened, only I stayed over at a friend's house, a school friend's house, for 3 days. And maybe I found out about it during those days because my parents were gone, and maybe the mother told me. So death was something to be sent away. Unfortunately, the very first time I had to deal with death, I am now 14 years old, and my mom couldn't tell me. She sent in, this was so weird. They always talked about this one cousin, right? Not in the most positive way. The cousin of the adult cousin, so it'd be our second cousin, came over, came in the house. Mom went to her bedroom, and the cousin came in to say, "Your dad died. That's it. Your dad's never coming home again," or "Dad's gone forever," or "Dad this." And I remember
Yeah.
screaming, "No, no, no." Therefore, waking up my brother. And I think my mother gathered us, or we were brought into my mom's bedroom to say, we're going to be okay.
We're going
That's
to
it.
get through this. Yeah.
However, she was in such shock of having her husband die,
Mm-hmm.
like boom, a heart attack back then they called it. And it was just, um, I think and growing up Jewish, you're supposed to cover some mirrors, but I don't think we covered that many mirrors. I wasn't allowed to see him in the casket. So I had tons of, and for years, tons of what does that look like?
Right.
And I didn't remember this, but well, there were two things I said that I didn't find out till long ago, or two things that were said. In the funeral car, we drove by my dad's high school, and I said, "Look, that's where Dad went to high school." That's that I heard myself say. Several years later, even after my mom died, my Aunt Jackie confessed to me. She goes, "You said that, but I need to tell you the truth. Your dad got his GED. He went in the front door of that high school and came out the back." And the second thing was, I never agreed with what your mother said, which was to my brother, "Let's just think about Dad being on a long hunting trip."
Oh, I can't stand it when parents say that.
And so I am just saying that out loud. That was my introduction to death, make me question everything about it and redo it all when my mom died, uh, 25 years later or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, parents, I am saying to you, or whoever's listening here or will be listening, please talk to your kids about death.
And give them permission to manage it how they choose. Kids grieve differently than adults. They
Yes.
don't grieve constantly. They have like little microbursts.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're perfectly okay in between, and that doesn't fit for adults who are not perfectly okay in that moment. So there's like
Yeah.
a culture clash in the house.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
side needs one thing, one needs the other. When I was widowed and my kids were young teens and mid-teens both times, I had arranged for other adults to take them out and do normal kid stuff and go prom shopping and get nails done because they needed like normalcy and real stuff
Right.
while I was doing the other. And kids need that, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
talk to them about it. Please don't hide funerals from them. Don't hide the reality of cremation if that's your choice. Kids kids do better with solid concrete information. They
I
really do. I I remember my mom when my grandma died, my grandma Effie, taking us to our local florist because everyone has their own florist, right? And she was like, "Now we're going to put flowers in grandma's hands." And she helped everybody picked out flowers. They put them on the little holder thing. We drove them to the mortuary, not the florist. We went in and she helped us hold grandma's hand so that we could put the flowers in. She normalized that this was part of the grief ritual is to spend time with the person who had died if that is how your family handles it, and arranging the pillow and putting in a soft blanket and doing the things that make approaching a dead person not scary but normal.
mhm.
And I'm quite certain that was because she came from a family where, that she came from an earlier generation that was normal.
Yes.
Plus, her uncles were funeral directors, so there's that too.
See, they have a different view. That's right.
And her
That's
dad was a minister, so lots of
yeah.
funerals in her world, right? But that was it. I didn't think twice about taking my grandma's hands and putting the flowers in between them and doing the things that you do for people who have died. And it's a very clear memory, and I'm very grateful that we had that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I I'm this might sound odd, but really what the passion I have
Hmm.
for grief and death education,
Right.
I and then immersing myself in those places where people die. I was a cancer nurse. I
Hmm.
worked on a hospice unit when hospice was just being born here in the Midwest.
Hmm.
I did home care. I did long-term care. I,
You
some
were
of it,
part of the whole process.
I needed to be present. I never wanted somebody to feel the way I felt. And so whatever it took to learn that
Hmm.
really is the passion that drives me. And
100%. And it really helps those that you work with. It
yeah,
gives them an easier grief process, a faster grief process, a
yeah,
healthier grief process. And
yes,
that in turn lets them help those that come behind them.
yeah,
I
yeah.
can't tell you how many times I have sat with a family at end of life in the early morning hours, and then we've prepared the body, and then I've stirred up pancake mix and made pancakes while the person laid wherever they were, usually the lazy boy or in the hospital bed, while we waited for the mortuary and told stories.
Right, right.
Because that's the way we used to do it, and
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with going back to it.
You know, the best distractor I ever had when someone died when I was there,
Yeah.
and I had to tell the whole family and sort of help them keep some sort of normalcy.
Hmm.
The tornado sirens went off after Uncle Chuck died.
Oh my
And
gosh.
all I could think of was, dear God, please don't let the house fall on Uncle Chuck. I'm seeing curled toes and striped socks, and I'm like, oh my God.
Or
You
have
know,
him fly away, and that would be even
right,
better.
right.
Right?
That would
Or
have been
born.
because it was a heavy tornado area and they went off and nobody could leave. And we had people from Southern California that never experienced a tornado. And they were freaking out, not because Uncle Chuck died, because there's tornado sirens and we had to all go to the basement.
Right.
And so it
Did you
was
take Uncle Chuck to the basement?
no, no. I did think about that, but that would have been too I
That would
did
have
hear
been awful. Yeah.
yeah, to have to,
And at Bernie's, we don't need that image.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And you know what? What's not true in Bernie's is those arms and things were moving when that's just, I mean, it takes a while for arms and legs to move like they did
To
in the
move again.
Bernie's.
Yes. They
Yeah,
do eventually, but yeah. And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there are tricks to that, but we're not going to share those on the air.
No, 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 no. So
Well, we wish everyone a very special Memorial Day weekend. I know lots of you were in the path of really horrible weather this week. And so please be safe. And when those sirens go off, do what you're supposed to do.
please.
Take care of yourselves. For those of you who are traveling, best of luck because it looks kind of lousy out there. And we will see you back here next week.
Yes, we will. All right, everyone.
Bye.
Happy and blessed Memorial Day weekend to you.
Oh, wait.